Over here on the right of the screen, we have some tables representing past and future emissions. The first thing to notice is that for future emissions, of course, everything depends on what actually will happen with future production. So the three different future production scenarios we saw here have different outcomes in terms of future emissions. And for instance, the stable assumption that Denmark continues to produce exactly the same would result in about 540 million tons of extra CO2 emissions. The declining profile, which shrinks everything, of course, is much less at 220 million tons. And the Danish government's own projections against its own reserves estimates are 520 million tons worth of emissions, roughly. But I say roughly because we don't have precise enough measurements, or certainly we don't have enough data in public domain from those measurements, that these are really exact figures. And so under different ways of calculating, you can see that those numbers start to change, and indeed the shapes on the graph. There's a lot of technical detail behind how to do the carbon accounting, how many barrels of oil equal exactly how much emissions in which different scopes, and the detail will be explained with background pages in as much detail, technical detail, as is necessary. For here at the top level, just to notice that choosing these different methods of estimating the CO2 produces marginally different numbers there. And those numbers are then embedded in an estimate of all of the past emissions from the fossil fuel industry, which in Denmark has been going since the early 1970s. And again, because of those differences, we represent each of them as a range, so that we can say that can Denmark's oil production up until now has produced between 1.1 and 1.4 gigatons of CO2, and gas between 500 and 580, making for a total then of Denmark's historic emissions up until now of between 1.6 and just under 2 gigatons. There are many different paths between these lowest and highest of estimates, and as I say, there's a lot of detail to get into, but for now at this top level we're simply representing a range between the lowest estimate produced by reliable methodologies and the highest.